it's Jackie with Intoxicating Arts, and today we're going to be making a Christmas card using one of my brand new stencils. And before I get into that, I'm just going to run through some of the new stencils with you. This is the Merry and Bright stencil, and you'll see it has two different rows of light bulbs there, and that's just so you can actually alternate the colors easily by placing them on top of each other and using one for each different color. And then the Merry and Bright sentiment on the bottom is nice and big if you want that to be the center of a card. And this is the stencil that we're going to be using today. It's called Angled Trees, and you can use these two stencils in here individually, or you can stack them together like I'm going to in the video. And I call that two-step stenciling, where you have to, stack them on top of each other. And this one is definitely a two-step stencil. It's called Tangled Lights, and you have the wired area down at the bottom that you can stencil first, and then the lights that coordinate and line up perfectly with that on top. And using a sponge dauber, you can easily get those to be multiple colors. I'm going to start with some Ken Oliver Color Burst in Phthalo Green and Alizarin Crimson, and we do sell these in our store now if you're interested in purchasing any of them. I have all of the colors available. I like to just tap the back of these. I feel like that gives me a little more control, and it lets a very small amount come out, and depending on the bottle, the amount that comes out when you tap it is going to be different. I noticed that my red tends to let a little more come out when I tap it, where the green I have to tap a little more to get some out. So I just tap and spray water on here until I get an effect that I like. And I tend to do these in 2 layers because I like the effect that I get. Depending on how many layers you do and dry in between, you're going to actually come out with different effects. So you'll see here, I'm going to do 1 layer, I'll dry it completely, and then I go back in and I do a 2nd layer. Part of the reason I do that is because I like my entire background to be covered with covered with color. So doing the 2 layers allows that to happen, but I also feel like it spreads the color around a little differently, so you can see the type of effect that I got doing the 2 layers. And now I'm going to grab my Angled Trees stencil and just tape down the background real quick using some 3M painter's tape. I like using that because it has a nice low tack. And going with the base here, which is the lined looking tree, and grabbed a sponge dauber and just sponging on some distress ink in Black Soot. And I didn't try to get particularly heavy with this ink because I thought it would be kind of cool if the background does show through a little, which it really doesn't in the end, but I thought it would be cool if it did anyway, so I wasn't trying to be super thorough there. And then you can see that I can easily line up these dots. You just want to kind of move it around a little bit and make sure that none of the dots are coming out through the lines. And since this stencil is kind of a translucent, semi-opaque material, it actually makes it pretty easy to get things lined up like that. And I just like to take my time and make sure everything is perfect, so I'm just lining it up here. And then I'm going to grab my Versamark ink so I can do some embossing. And the first time I did this, I actually used my Emboss It dabber, which would have worked perfectly fine, except for I squeezed it a lot and I just made way too much of the embossing ink come out of the dabber. So this is actually my 2nd attempt at this card, and it worked a lot better just doing the Versamark pad directly to the stencil like this. And you'll notice that it will actually get your Versamark pad dirty because it's going to transfer some of that distress ink back onto your Versamark pad. That didn't bother me too much, but I wanted to warn you about that in case you try this technique. Now you're aware that you will definitely get some ink back on your Versamark pad. So there, you could see it right there. And once you're sure that you have that nice and saturated, I kind of went a little crazy and made sure I got it really saturated good. I wanted to make sure all the dots would come up the way they're supposed to. But once you have that done pretty good, you can move on and grab some what is that stuff called? Sticky Embossing Powder by Ranger, and the reason I'm using that today is because I'm going to be doing some foiling. So I'm just going to pull my stencil off, and I will grab my sticky embossing powder and dump that all over the image. And see, that's what it looks like right there, in case you're curious. It's great for adding glitter. You can add foil like I am. I'm going to be doing a using fab foil, which is my first time using fab foil, and it worked out pretty cool. They actually say with fab foil, if you do a technique like this, that you will end up with sort of a distressed effect, and I found that to be true. You'll see in the end how the circles are a little bit of a distressed effect, which was fine with me. It actually ended up looking pretty cool, so you'll see that in the end. I'm just tapping that all on the image here. But yeah, you can use it for glitter. You can do flocking, which I own but I never really use, and it's just a really cool powder. So here you see, first you heat up the powder, then you put your foil on, and I wasn't really entirely sure what to do here, so I just kind of burnished it on using a piece of paper, and I kind of peeked at it and I saw that it wasn't really working, so I heated it up a little more and burnished it some more with some paper. You don't really need to burnish it with paper, that's just what I feel like doing, and ripped it off, and there you go. So it does have a little bit of that distressed effect, which originally wasn't what I was going for, but I ended up liking it in the end. And now you'll see I'll grab that Emboss It dabber so I can get the star to be silver. And that time it worked really well because I knew to not push down a lot with the Emboss It dabber, or I would have it seeping out under my stencil, and I really didn't want to ruin this card at that point because that would have been horrible to ruin it on my second attempt. So here you can see the beautiful foil shining through. I'm just showing that off because when you look at it straight on, it kind of looks boring. It looks just black, but when you move it around a lot, you can see how pretty and shiny it is. And I think this card ended up having kind of a contemporary effect, but it was like a contemporary but distressed effect, and it's a weird effect that I wasn't quite expecting, but I ended up liking it in the end. And I'm just using my Tim Holtz Distress It tool here to just make the edges. I thought that might kind of bring it all together with the fact that the circles were kind of distressed, so that's why I wanted to distress the edges to bring it all together. And I think I'm using Fired Brick right there. And that's pretty much it. I just mounted on a black piece of paper. I was going to add a sentiment, but it looked kind of weird to me. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day or night. Bye!